Welcome back to some more Material UI. Last time we were talking about customizing the color palette here. So we've got a new color on the app bar. We've got some of our headings have a new color. The body text has a new color. And if we come over, this is the part that we're going to concentrate on here right now. Is just these buttons. I want them to look a little bit more like what we've got going on over here. That is our sample. Right, something to go off of. So I want to get closer to this feel. But in order to do that, we obviously can't just change the colors, because these buttons still look pretty much like the buttons that did before. So what I'm going to have you take a look at with this video is how do we override what is going on with the core components inside of React. Specifically, we're going to look at the button component here first, but I want to show you where this is in the Material UI documentation, of course. So let's go over here, and we're going to come down to customization, just like we did last time. Only instead of palette or typography, what we're actually going to look at is globals. What globals is going to show us is that we can pass an override property to our create MUI theme. And then inside of that override property, we can override styles for specific components. It's showing us the MUI button here, right? And it's saying text color white, right? Now, we might ask ourselves, well, how do we know it's MUI button? Is it just like MUI and then the name of the component? Close, but not quite. The way that we would figure this out is to go to the actual button component. So we're going to keep this open, but we're going to go ahead and open up API documentation for the button. And I'm going to open this in a new tab. Because what I want to show you is, previously we showed you the props here and what the props mean and how we look through to see what we're looking at. And I said we would get back to the CSS section at some point in time. This is that some point in time. So the way that you get that MUI button, it's from right here. So it's showing you what the global classes are. Now it's saying there are some rule names. So there's MUI button root, label, text, and you notice right over here, text. So the base is MUI button, and then text is altering a specific set of properties. In particular, this style is applied to the root element if variant equals text. Right? Now we're not using variant text. We're just going to start by trying to alter the root. Because what I want to do is I want to get pointy corners and I want to get a border on these things. So let's try altering just the root here. So I'm going to come over here, and on our create MUI theme, we want to put a new property on this settings object that's going to be overrides. Now in our overrides, we're going to be overriding MUI button to start off with. And we want to try and do just the root. So if we come back over to the documentation, root is styles applied to the root element. So we're thinking, okay, well, root element, yeah, we just want a border and border radius. So I'm going to say border. Now remember, we would normally do styles where it says border dash radius. But remember, when we're adding properties here on objects and Material UI, we need border capital R radius, no dash in between. And then we want radius to be 0. And then for the next setting, we want border. And I'm going to do a 2 pixel. Oh, got to make this a string. 2 pixel solid. And then for the color, I think I'm going to use that same color that we used for the text, 6 3s. That way we're matching colors that we're using before, right? We use this for the body text here, so we'll use it for the border here. Now in here, right, it's got these sort of black edges, but that doesn't look like strictly black. It looks a little off black, so I think that's going to work out for us. let's go ahead over to our page. Now you'll notice it doesn't look like it changed anything. Now it doesn't look like it changed anything because we're specifically using a variant here. So the variant styles are taking precedent over the root styles. So if you wanted to see this in action, you can right click on the button, go to inspect, and you're going to notice some things when you inspect the element here. Now I'm going to go to the wrapping button element here, and you're going to notice that it has MUI button dash root. That's what we're altering, root. So if we come down here, we can see that we've got MUI button root, and if we look, we can see border radius is 4 pixels here, right? But we want our border radius of 0. So the way that we're going to get this to work for us is to actually have this on the variant styles that we wanted. Now you might ask yourselves, okay, well, how do I get to the variant styles? Well, you can also see that there's some additional classes here. MUI button dash contained, MUI button dash contained primary. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to alter the contained variant. Now, in order to do this, we might say, okay, well, can we look that up here? We absolutely can look that up here. You can see that there's a contained option here, right? So this is the contained rule name, and it says that it alters the styling of root element when the variant equals contained. So that's what we're looking for. So I'm going to come back over to my app, and then I'm going to put in, oh, sorry, we were supposed to put root on here. So let's put root. My goodness. We're going to see the same thing, though. We're going to see that the overrides don't actually take place. So we've got some of them here, right? Like the border radius was fine. We were able to do the actual border, right? So we were able to get those two things. And this would be like if we were to switch variants on this. So let's go ahead and take a look at what would happen if we switched variants. So let's go to details, and we'll switch variant to outlined. So you can see outlined switches up a little bit. Now, border radius 0 still taking effect from the root, but any new styles that are going to be on it that are overriding the previous from root are not going to take place. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, we can totally change variants in here. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to change maybe the thickness of the font. So I'm gonna bold this. So in here on the root, I'm gonna try and do a font weight bold, and bold has to be a string. Come back over. As it refreshes, we can see, yep, it's a little bit thicker, a little bit more substantial. So that's pretty good. That's kind of what I'm hoping for here. Now the other thing that I'm going to do is something tricky with the box shadow, because what I want to do is they have this like box and then a box behind it. I'm going to get that box behind it look, but by using box shadow. So what we're going to do is we're going to add the box shadow property. And box shadow is going to be, I'm going to do a 3 pixel offset with no dither. And then we're going to change it to be that dark teal color, so this color here. Alright, now you notice that my box shadow is not taking effect. This is when I would have to change to the variant that I'm working with. So let me go ahead and change to my variant. Which we already saw was contained, and I'm just going to move my box shadow onto contained. And there we go. So we can see the box shadow, but you'll notice when I hover, my box shadow goes away completely, right? Because it has a hover state to it. So hover is taken care of by using a pseudo selector. We can use this same sort of thing when we're working with Material UI. We do this in a very special way, though. What we're going to do is we're going to add a new property, but we're going to use strings for this property because we need an ampersand and the pseudo selector hover. So what the ampersand is doing is telling it to attach it to this contained. This is a Sass thing. I don't want to get too much into this, but Sass does this. You'll notice some JavaScript precompilers do this as well for CSS. But we can use the ampersand pseudo selector hover, and then we can give it another set of styles. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy what we have here with the box shadow, but I'm going to change the depth a little bit. I'm going to change it to 1:1, so it looks like it shrinks in, but we still don't have any dither, so it's not going to look like it's feathered. There we go. Right? That's not too bad. That's pretty good. Now, I don't particularly like the secondary on this particular button, so I'm going to change it back to what we had before. And then we'll have 2 of those. So this will be primary. And there we go. We've got our 2 buttons. Now, this button's going to be replicated everywhere that we have button now. So every single button that we've ever added in our application will look like this. That's the power of being able to use the override to override how all of the styles being handled for a specific component. Now, we're going to take a look at how to do this with a couple other additional components. Before we do that, though, I want to talk about just kind of an organizational thing. We could absolutely leave this on root if we wanted that on all components. Or we can move all of these styles onto contained if we only wanted this to be available when something was using the contained variant. That way we could potentially use the other variants for other purposes. So if we've got this on contained, we'll go back. So we've got 2 buttons, and then I'll go ahead and change the other one to outlined again. See, but outline's got, and it's a little hard to see with the primary. Let's go ahead and make that the secondary again. So now it's got its original rounded corners. So if that's okay, we're totally good to just leave all of these styles on the contained variant. If I was organizing this myself, what I would probably do is I would leave my border radius, and then I would leave the font weight bold, but I'd move the border onto contained. Because I think that that's more appropriate. Because I would potentially want to do something a little bit different with the outlined. So this is how we're tackling the button, but there's a couple other ones that I would like to go over here in this video so that we can take a look at them and get our application a little bit more customized. One of which is the paper here, right? Because it doesn't have the pointed corners. I'd love to give it a border as well, really make it feel like this, which starts to make it feel a little bit more like what we got going on over here in our sample. And then that will also use it on this area here. Now, these elements are using cards. We're going to see something interesting when we go ahead and update paper. So let's go ahead and make our commits, and then we'll go over and look at how we customize paper. Alright, so we said we wanted to take a look at customizing paper, and then we're also going to look at customizing card, right? Card is what we used up here, and then paper is what we used on the details page here, and we also have it on the edit page. But let's go ahead and switch back that edit button too, so that we've got the edit button back to normal state. Alright, my edit button's back. That's good. Alright, so we've got edit button, back button, like all of our buttons are good. But let's take a look at paper. We want paper here to be a little bit different. We're going to give it the thick border, we're going to give it the sharp corners. I'm even liking this little raised drop shadow look here, so we'll give it that as well. And we're going to give it a different color though, not this white. We're actually probably going to go with that light teal color. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. I'm going to come back over to app.js. We're going to do overrides. Now, in order to find out how to adjust paper, what we should do is look in the API section. So we've got the API section open, component API, and we want to look for paper. Luckily, this is all in alphabetical order, so we'll just go down to the P's, and we'll grab paper. Now, we want to go down to the CSS section, and we can see that it's MUI paper. So we're going to go ahead and adjust MUI paper. And then we need to figure out what on MUI paper we want to adjust. Now, I would like to adjust just sort of the root, right? Like the base of what's there. Now, pretty much every component in Material UI has a root because it always has like some sort of base without any of the variants or what have you. So this is our root. We're just going to start with our root. Now, like I said, I want to add the border styles. I also want to change the background color. So let's start with background color. And we want that lighter teal, which is this one here. And then we want our border. Now I'm going to use the same border that we had in contained here. This one is totally copying and pasting that over here. So background color and my border have been changed, right? But we also want the rounded corner, so I'm going to do border radius 0. Alright, well the background color has changed, but my border radius hasn't. I do have my actual border here, but the reason that my border radius isn't changing is because border radius is being handled by something else. Now we could try and figure this out by right-clicking and inspecting this. That's absolutely a way that we can go because we can see what styles are being given priority on this wrapping element. I can see that there's an MUI paper root here. I can also see that there's an elevation and a MUI paper rounded. So we could potentially take a look at the API documentation and see if they've got this. So they've got this square. So it's already got a square property. We could potentially update square all the way across because what happens is for this, we have this rounded property. But if I never want a rounded one on any of my styles, I could potentially just use this rounded and target that. So we're going to do that because we are changing how the whole setup works. So I'm going to use the rounded, and I'm going to have it always be our border radius 0. So now if we come back to our app, we can totally see that there's actually some pointed corners here. But we also wanted that sort of drop shadow look here. Now it's got a drop shadow on it, and again, we can go through the element and inspect and figure out like what's got the drop shadow, but specifically elevation is handling the drop shadow. And if we come over to the documentation, we can see in the CSS there's an elevation 0, elevation 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 24. So it goes quite a ways. I'm only going to change a handful of them, probably elevation 1, 2, 3. We'll probably change those. Now elevation 0 basically is getting rid of the box shadow, right? It's just no box shadow whatsoever. So we're going to start at elevation 1, because that's kind of the default is elevation 1. So we're going to do this property for elevation 1, elevation 2, and elevation 3. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do elevation 1. And what we're going to do is change box shadow. And then we're going to do a 4 pixels by 3 pixels, no dither, with that dark teal. And this whole thing needs to be a string. Now, I want to rinse and repeat this for 2 and 3. But I want to change it around a little bit because I want it to actually look a little different. So I'm going to do a 4 here and I'm going to do a 5 here. The X, so this is X-axis, Y-axis. So it's the Y that I'm going down. So if we were to change the property for elevation, we could absolutely look at 1, 2, and 3 and see what those elevations would be. But if we start, this is our elevation 1, right? And this is looking pretty sharp. This is actually right around what I'm wanting to look at, but I want to show you that we've changed the 1, 2, and 3. We're also going to try 4 just to show you, like, okay, this is altered. We're going to change it on the attribute one, so it's going to be attributes that we're changing here. So habitat will stay the same, attributes will be changing so we can see the difference. So let's go ahead and look at paper being used on the page here. So we've got paper right here. Now, according to the documentation, to change elevation, we pass elevation and then the number, right? Its default is 1, so we're going to do elevation 2. And you can see, it's a little hard to see, but you can see it just pushes out just a little bit, right? A little bit further down. Now, I'm going to go ahead and we'll push it a little bit further with 3. And even a little bit further down, right? Now, if we wanted these to be more significant when we were doing the adjustments, we could absolutely do that. But I do want to show you when I get to 4, we will now no longer be using our styles, but we'll be using the styles that were the defaults. So the defaults are still there. We're overriding the other defaults. Now I'm just going to let it be the default 1, so we're just going to leave that at that. But I did want to show you that we are changing each one of those settings and what the property is coming in for that. So we can get really granular here. So this is looking pretty good for paper, but my text color is not so great. But I don't want to change text color for typography all across the board, because if I change it to this lighter orange here, then these aren't going to look so good on this tan. So I'm going to have to do some custom stuff for this a little bit later on, and we'll talk about how we do that on kind of a one-off basis. But we want to change our global stuff as much as possible first. So first, before we go over, I'm actually kind of thinking we should change the colors on these. So we'll change the colors on the chips probably to the secondary color. So let's go ahead in and look at our chips on creature attributes and habitat. So chips, we're going to do color secondary. Copy that and We're going to do the same thing on habitat. Yeah, that looks much better. Let's go to edit, see what it looks like on edit. Yeah, I like that. That's nice because that X really stands out now. So that's looking pretty sharp. Now, in between videos, I'm probably going to add some spacing on these elements here because it would look better with some spacing on it, just so that they're not butting up against one another, because you don't want things touching one another. It looks weird, it makes people kind of like frustrated and angry while they look at it. One side effect, though, our card component is actually leveraging paper to do its elevated look. So by changing that on that page, we've changed it here as well. So that's a bit of a problem because I want a different look here. I don't really want this to look like these two attributes and habitat sections here. So back on list, what we want to do is override the card component. Now we're using a couple things on card. We're using MUI card and we're using MUI card header as well. So let's go ahead and alter both of those. But first, let's go ahead and check in all of the changes for paper so we can actually commit that. Now, again, we would want to come over here to the API and find card, and then find out which properties that we need to change. Now you'll notice as I click on card, there were some other options here. We have card, card action area, card actions, card content, card header. Now specifically, I'm wanting to adjust card because I want a different background color on these elements, but I want to also separate out what is this header section by altering card header. So we're going to want to look at card and card header. We'll start with card first, and then as we adjust card, you're going to see why I wanted to adjust card header. So it's MUI card and it's just root. So we're going to come in here, we're going to add MUI card with the root property on it. And on the root property, we're going to add a couple of things. We're going to do a background color, and the background color is actually going to be, we want it to be the same thing that we're using for the primary, this one right here. So that's going to be our background color. Now it's already got the border and the drop shadow look from our paper styles. So I'm just going to leave it at that and hope that it maintains all that while doing that one override. All right, so this is not bad. We've got that color, but again, I want to separate out the header. This is kind of not so great with this color on top of the orange there, or the amberish color. So let's go ahead and alter the header. So we need to find out what that component's going to be called. And to do that, remember we want to come over here and we're going to do card header. And then we'll scroll down to the CSS section and you can see it's MUI card header. Now we're just going to start by taking care of the root. Like I said, they pretty much all have root, and I try and do as much as I can on root without getting into the variants unless I want it to be variant specific. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a background color. And for this one, I'm actually going to add that teal. You'll see why here in a second. I've got a visual in my head here. So we're going to add the lighter teal. And then we're going to add a border. The border is going to look a lot like what we're doing on the buttons. So border 2 pixel solid. And then we're going to do box sizing set to border box. And then I'm going to make the width, let's say 90%. And then I'm going to do a font weight bold. Because I want anything in there to just be bold. I want it to, have some substance. Now I could do this as individual styles on the fonts, right? But let's go ahead and see how this is going to turn out for us. All right, so that's not bad. Like it's getting to where I want. But what I'm going to tell you visually what I'm looking for here is I want this header piece to be centered, and then I want it to overlap the top a little bit. Now to do this, we're gonna play with the margin. So I'm gonna put margin in here, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna do like a negative 30 pixels, and then auto, which will center the thing for us, and then a 0 on the bottom. So no margin on the bottom. Or we could put a margin on the bottom. Nah, no margin. I'm vacillating. All right, now card has an overflow hidden on it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to remove the overflow hidden by overriding on the base MUI card. So we're going to say overflow visible. Now you can see that it's actually coming over top of it, which is great. That's exactly what I was hoping for. But it's overlapping the title here. So to account for this negative 30 pixels on the card, I'm actually going to put a margin on the top that is that 30 pixels. So I could put margin, and I could do something like 30 pixels 0, 0 to get only margin on top. Or I could just put the 30 pixels and set this to margin top. So now it's looking a little bit more appropriate. I've got my overlap. Like I like what's going on here now. Am I potentially going to need to alter the font color? Yeah, because it's blending a little bit, just like we saw on the details page here. Like this is blending a little bit. It's a little hard to read. So we're going to have to adjust that, but we're going to have to do that a little bit more specifically, right? Because this is typography that's taking over here. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to inadvertently change this just to make it more visible on here. So we're going to have to do that a little bit more custom. But for right now, we've got some stuff that's going on that's actually pretty good. This is starting to look a little bit more custom, and it's starting to look a little bit more like what we got going on over here. So this is our global overrides. The last override that I want to go over is the form field. Now, form fields have a lot of different components in them. So I'm going to come over here to edit, and I'm kind of going to walk you through this in a bit of a faster fashion than I probably normally would. So what I'm going to do is I want these corners to be pointy, right? And I want my borders to be a little bit darker, just like everything else. So I'm going to do a couple of settings, but I'm going to do them on... Actually, before we even do those, let's just go ahead and commit what we've got. So we'll go ahead and commit. All right, now the property that we're going to add here is we're going to be looking at MUI outlined input. That's the style that's here. And we're going to alter on here root. And we're also going to alter something called notched outline. because these are where the properties are that I want to override. So notched outline I need because I need the border color, and this is where the border color is defined. So border, I'm just going to do border color. I'll leave its sizing and everything in place, but we're just going to do border color, and we're going to make it same dark gray, super dark gray, but not quite black. And then background color I want to set up here, or sorry, not background color, what am I thinking? I'm thinking border radius. It's going to be 0. So now if I save this and we come over, we'll see we've got pointed corners and we've got a darker border, which I like this a lot more. We could potentially up the sizing here, right? So I could do the border at 1 pixel, blah 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 blah. But I like it with its borders. We're going to leave it at that. So now we've got our form fields, right? They're all custom. So let's go ahead and commit that. So here you've been able to take a look at a few overrides. Remember, we can override any kind of Material UI component. We just have to find out what's called and then what its various rule names are. So root is on every single one, but they have different variants and such that are handling specific styling. So you would have to use those in those cases. But this gives us something that is much more custom, much more like along the lines of like how we would want to see this. So this is looking pretty sharp, but we have some things that are not so great. Like in the footer, I can't actually make out the text at all in the footer, so that's going to need some custom attention. The header here is going to need some custom attention because the font color is not great on there. And I'd actually like to do something so that these are kind of the same size and they maintain that same size. So we'll take a look at how we do that. Plus, one other thing, we want to be able to take care of the font here as well. And I'm probably going to add a little custom something around our images so that they start looking a little more like what we got going on over here too. Now with that, thank you for joining me, and join me next time to go over how we start getting custom styles at the component level rather than on the global level that we've been doing so far.